días. Los y las queremos invitar a tomar asiento para poder dar inicio a esta actividad. Les agradecemos dejar en silencio sus celulares, por favor. Muy buenos días. La Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe de las Naciones Unidas, CEPAL, y el Centro Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial,
the National Artificial Intelligence Center, welcome you to this conference on artificial intelligence for sustainable development in Latin America. We would like to greet the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, José Manuel Salazar Chirinac, the Minister of Science and Technology, Aysén Echeverry, and the Head of Delegation of the European Union in Chile, Hugo Sanker, the Senior Director of Google Alphabet, Eve Anderson, and the representatives of international organizations and cooperation agencies, the UN system, academia, researchers, special guests, friends. To begin, I would like to invite Mr. José Manuel Salazar Chirinac to offer a few words of welcome. Good morning, all. I would especially like to welcome Aysén Echeverry, Minister of Science and Technology, Knowledge and Innovation of Chile, Mr. Hugo Sanker, Head of Cooperation of the Delegation of the European Union in Chile, Ms. Eve Anderson, Senior Director of Google Alphabet, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of cooperation agencies and international organizations, colleagues from the funds, agencies, and programs of the UN system, friends. It is a great honor for me to be here with you today, inaugurating this most important seminar on artificial intelligence for sustainable development in Latin America and the Caribbean. This initiative comes at a crucial time when, as a region, we must accelerate development and the fulfillment of the 2030 agenda. The countries of the region are undergoing an average growth, a very low average growth, only 0.8%. And we continue to repeat this because it's not only about the avalanche of crises and lack of progress, but it is an entire decade. If you look backward, the growth rates are also quite mediocre. When we were still in the midst of the pandemic and haven't still recovered, we saw the different crises, the war in Ukraine, the interest rates, all this at a time when the climate change is also becoming increasingly acute and technological revolution is accelerating. It is at this juncture of changes, in the midst of globalization in the world, that we find ourselves in a great technological acceleration, and we're trying to understand that artificial intelligence, which appears as a new transforming force with such a wide range of potential impacts, it is no exaggeration to say that it can change the course of human history. No less than huge magnitude that we're facing, but many of these impacts will be positive and others are potentially negative or challenging and require reflection, strategic vision, political vision, and regulation. The countries of the world will need to define strategies and action plans with respect to the development and impacts of AI and its multiple applications. AI has the potential to revolutionize multiple aspects of society, including health, education, transport, etc. And in terms of the goal of transforming business development models in Latin America and the Caribbean, AI, also here at ECLAC in support of the different governments, AI has an immense potential. It is a technology with tremendous power to achieve more productive, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. AI-based solutions, by improving data-driven decision-making and task automation, can increase productivity in multiple fields of human endeavor. By enabling more efficient use of resources, reducing waste and emissions, and improving waste management and recycling, AI can also promote sustainable production as well as optimizing energy consumption and promoting renewable energy. This is particularly relevant for a region such as ours, where agriculture and natural resource-based activities play a key role in its growth and development possibilities. In addition, AI, if well used, could be a catalyst for productivity in the service sector, ensuring that, as Acemoglu and Restrepo insist, these technologies should be complementary to labor rather than substituting it. AI can boost entrepreneurship and innovation in sectors such as e-commerce, financial technology, and agri-technology by facilitating new business models and increasing the scope for R&D investment. In terms of inclusion and access to public services, AI could play a fundamental role. For example, personalized education enabled by AI can facilitate access in remote areas and respond to specific needs, thus helping to close the educational gaps we have today in the region in terms of healthcare delivery by enabling faster and more accurate diagnosis, speeding up drug discovery, enabling personalized and remote treatments, as well as detecting disease outbreaks. AI can also substantially improve access to healthcare. AI can also improve financial inclusion by analyzing non-traditional financial data, enabling access to credit and loans without standard credit history, and thus solving the problems of information asymmetry that have long plagued financial markets. This could, for example, lead to significant opportunities for the development and formalization of SMEs in the region. However, in order to take full advantage of these technologies and their potential, an enabling environment is required in which some of the main determinants are digital infrastructure, data availability, digital talent, and digital innovation, as well as entrepreneurship capabilities. Hence, it is essential that AI be worked on explicitly and deliberately within the framework of the productive development policies of the countries of the region and their territories. Also, different areas of work and the division led by Marcos Inácio and executive development, we are updating our vision and our work in order to address these new technologies and finding better ways to do this. They have some characteristics of the old industrial policies and systems, but we would like to improve on that. And also, through this vision, to work on specific projects within the framework of cluster initiatives that are being developed in multiple sectors. We are recommending that the countries work on cluster initiatives because they're very useful for the adoption of technologies, but also to generate their own developments, employment, to solve the bottlenecks and talent needs, etc. And although we are enthusiastic about the potential that IA represents for the region, we're also aware that it entails great challenges. We must be very attentive to the ethical issues regarding its implementation and must delve deeper into the challenges related to data privacy, as well as bias and discrimination in decisions related to the different algorithms. In a previous meeting, we were talking about one of the areas that Eve is in charge of, which is diversity in access and how Google addresses it without bias, people and identities. In order to take advantage of the opportunities and minimize the potential threats of AI, a comprehensive and coordinated public policy approach is required to address the challenges and barriers to adoption and implementation. Hence, the relevance of having a measurement tool such as a first Latin American Artificial Intelligence Index, which will be presented by CENIA, the National Center for Artificial Intelligence of Chile. And I'd like to congratulate all of the partners of the project. It's a huge service for conversation on these new AI technologies. We are certain that the findings of this innovative work will shed light on where to focus policy efforts for the development of AI in our countries. The main recommendations in the chapter on the future of AI in Latin America are an excellent basis for these purposes, and there are aspects that we will be working on moving forward. So this is, as I mentioned, something we've been working on at ECLAC on the regional digital agenda. It's been ongoing for several years, looking to the 9th Ministerial Conference on the Information Society in Latin America and the Caribbean, and to be held in Santiago, Chile in 2024. ECLAC is the technical secretariat of ELAC, and thanks to the support of the European Union, through the EULAC Digital Alliance, will continue to support the countries of the region to advance in the construction of enabling environments in terms of connectivity, seeking data governance to continue working on sustainable and inclusive development, helping create a future in which AI contributes to the prosperity and well-being of all people in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Executive Secretary for his remarks. I would like to invite the Head of Cooperation, Mr. Evo Sankert, to speak to all of you regarding this event. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Executive Secretary, Minister, representative of Google, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps. It's an honor and a pleasure for the European Union to be here today. We are pleased to be holding this conversation today on a topic that has significant potential for cooperation relative to artificial intelligence. As you know, one of the main results of the EU-CELAC Summit in July was the European, Latin American, and Caribbean Digital Partnership. This constitutes a joint commitment between the EU and the region in order to accelerate the digital transformation with a key focus on humans. In order to roll out, implement these commitments, we are here to address the foundations of key initiatives regarding digital transformation and AI throughout the region. Now, ECLAC plays a key role here with regard to policy dialogue in other areas. And here today, we will talk about connectivity, data governance, electronic governance, cybersecurity, and our implementing partners are currently working on their schedule and their working plan. But let me refer to key issues. For example, consultations with the countries throughout the region have shown that digital health are key, specifically in rural and indigenous areas, deploying 5G, the gender gap relative to digital aspects and other gaps, artificial intelligence, and more topics are the ones that have been pointed out by the countries throughout the region. Also, let's not forget cybersecurity and technical assistance. These are key issues as well. Now, the second pillar of this partnership is focusing on connectivity. we have an emblematic, a flagship program that was launched in 21 between the EU and Latin America, specifically between Portugal and Brazil. I'm referring to the digital highway benefiting 65 million individuals and with 43,000 miles of fiber optics. Now, this means that through Vela, an emergency worker could receive data from Copernicus from a region that's 500 kilometers away, but in a very quick period of time instead of waiting an hour. Now, the second phase will involve expanding this digital highway to other countries throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. We also believe that it's important to boost innovation and cooperation in the private sector. To this end, we have a program called Digital Accelerator EULAC. This facilitates investment in the private sector, specifically regarding digital areas. We aim to boost innovative capacity, provide support to SMEs, and to work closely with them in order to provide support to 100,000 new companies in the region and providing acceleration services. Finally, we will be creating 2 regional Copernicus centers. We already have a data repository in Chile, rather, for Copernicus data, the University of Chile. In March, this center was launched here in Chile, and thus far the center is only monitoring the Chilean region territory, but we aim to add services for the rest of the region with regard to ocean and land surveillance activities. Now, this is very important so that think tanks and private companies in Latin America can actually develop their apps and not rely on public agencies in Europe. The idea is for these activities to be developed here in the region. It's already started, it's already underway. And so with this digital highway, we can, and other services, we can encourage many more academic exchanges. Copernicus is a free service, in fact, offered by the EU with a wealth of different applications. In Chile, for example, we will be using this for a forest restoration project in Valdivia, and this will be focusing on surface water engagement. We will also be mobilizing this for territorial planning and zoning for green hydrogen initiatives in Chile. We are also considering the possibility of developing an app to speed up or to monitor the impact of lithium extraction on underwater and surface water systems. So these are just some of the exciting initiatives to come. We know that these data can be applied across the board in different sectors, such as in agriculture as well. We already know that this is being used in agricultural sector in Chile, for example. So, in short, this is something that exists. And we also have a research program that's quite significant. And we have many additional opportunities to leverage this. Finally, allow me to mention the gender issue. I recently read an article on artificial intelligence, how it says that it's marked by gender concerns. And a study was conducted by the EU in Uruguay to test artificial intelligence. And many questions were asked. For example, in 2050, who do you think will be leading the world? And the answer was 4 old men. And who's your favorite superhero? 4 muscular men. In other words, artificial intelligence is replicating these gender gaps and these gender-related components. And so this speaks to the importance of addressing gender across the board and as a key issue. Allow me to conclude by saying that we are very pleased to be working with ECLAC and Chile and the other countries throughout the region on these initiatives. And I hope that this will be a very fruitful day for you all. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Developing artificial intelligence is aimed at revolutionizing industries, societies, and economies around the globe. The combination of large volumes of data, sophisticated models, and computing capacity has allowed for us to see an explosion of opportunities and applications. At the same time, this has led to latent risks and challenges that call for more reflection by states, civil society, academia, and the private sector, considering the ubiquitousness of all of this. Now, these reflections are taking place in the North, but this is not necessarily taking place throughout all of the developing nation, specifically in LAC region. So there are many questions and concerns that we have pondered with regard to AI. We know that their impact the impact is across the board. So that's why it's critical to address this topic regionally. Allow me to invite the Minister of Science and Knowledge, Ms. Echeverri, who will talk about artificial intelligence and scientific development throughout Latin America. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Mr. Manuel Salazar. Good morning, Head of the European Delegation, Ivo Sanker, and others. Thank you for the invitation. I would also like to congratulate the Senya team for everything that we will be learning about today. We know that you have put significant efforts into this. I would like to begin my remarks by saying that I am enthralled by technology. I have worked in this realm for many years, and those of us who have done this really seen major leaps and bounds with regard to AI in the last 8 months, and we're enthralled. Again, there are so many papers and articles and announcements appearing daily, and you really just can't keep up with all of this activity. We also, given that, well, those of us who work in policy are, again, enthralled and constantly challenged. I'm sure many of you out there share this dizziness with me, that it's quite a challenge to address AI from a public policy perspective. It's not just necessary to have good connectivity and good tools, but you also have to have much more. It's not enough to have individuals studying this behind the scenes or have good computing capacity, but it goes beyond that. Those of us who are accountable for policy matters need to really dig our heels in. We need to figure out how to best come up with public policies that will foster innovation, that will allow for this technology to make great strides, and that will have an impact of the several different aspects mentioned. For example, improving health, improving agriculture, and having tools that will allow us to address the major climate change aspects we need to face and to address the threats, risks, challenges, etc. We know that as far as gender bias is concerned and racial bias is concerned, there are already risks there. Now, ChatGPT has, for better or for worse, it has shown that it tends to be used more by white men than white women, etc., so forth. So we can see the bias already evolving. One needs to be aware of that. What does this actually mean? When these types of applications are based on certain databases, we see that they also have an impact on how we relate to each other, how the governments treat and relate to their citizens as well. And so we will also see that there are global ecosystems where technology is available to individuals and the individuals are not necessarily passive users of the technology. Now, doing that is extremely difficult. And I think that if we take a look at what's going on internationally and how The European Union, for example, is addressing this, UNESCO, ECLAC, and other agencies and bodies internationally. We see that there's no easy answer. Now, the good news is that we're not alone in this endeavor. We are all working, we're all joining forces and together. And when I look around the room here, I had recognized many familiar faces, individuals who have been involved in this sector for many years. I know that I see that you are my brothers in this initiative, brothers and sisters. So we know that technology doesn't necessarily recognize borders, but we need to find borders. We need to impose borders. And when we do this from a public policy perspective, from a multilateral perspective, we will be able to have international standards that will specifically help technology to develop well, and that the values underpinning these technologies be also shared by countries with similar mindsets. And I would say that that is one of the fantastic contributions of this community of practitioners globally and regionally. Allow me to now conclude by referring to the Chilean experience. Chile has an AI policy that was launched roughly 4 years ago. That may seem quite young and in diapers, but as far as AI is concerned, that is eons. And this is a policy that involves a 90 billion peso investment, specifically to boost R&D capacity in AI. And we are proud of some of the results, such as Senya. Senya is one of the centers that is part of this AI policy. We believe it provides us with that again allows us to confirm how important it is to have partnerships and the real value of having scientific technological capacity nationwide that is robust. So Senya allows us to continue training Chileans here and abroad with regard to AI. We have scholarship programs, and I can see many of the deans of our universities here, and we have some graduate programs in AI. We have many different partnership programs as well. And I would have to say that all of these, and we will see this when we hear from Senya, all of these initiatives involve many disciplines, cross-cutting disciplines. And this speaks to how developing this technology is not just for the purpose of developing technology, but to understand the impact that this can have on other disciplines. And these disciplines, again, have impact on our industrial development, our social development, economic development. Allow me to commend the Senya team for their work on this indicator. I was able to have a sneak peek of this last week. And I would like to mention that from within the Ministry of Science, we are fully convinced that this will contribute significantly to how we are able to continue developing public policy and how this will allow us to accelerate our work with multiple partners. For example, UNESCO. There will be a ministerial meeting held in October, led by the Undersecretary. And this is just another drop in the bucket of many different initiatives being carried out by countries throughout the region. So again, thank you so much to my dear friends from Senya. We believe that this will be extremely valuable to all of us.
Muchas gracias, ministra. La relevancia que tiene la transformación digital.
The relevance of digital transformation to the development of Latin America and the Caribbean has made it evident through studies, congresses, and for dialogue that there is a very positive impact of AI, and minimizing the risks of AI is of the utmost importance. It is important for the state of the art and the practice of AI in the region. We'd like to invite Eve Anderson to take the floor, Senior Director of Google Alphabet, who will be sharing using AI to build technology.
Hola todas y todos.
Hello, and I'm going to be speaking in English.
I work at Google and I have slides over there. So I'm going to talk with you today about using AI to build inclusive technology. I lead a team in Google. I'm an engineer by training, and we are a team of engineers, user experience designers, researchers, product managers, and we develop software in 3 areas. One is in the area of accessibility to help people with disabilities. The second is in the area of product inclusion and equity. And this is about making Google software work very well across genders, races, skin tones, and other dimensions of identity. And the third part of what my team does is internationalization. And that's about making Google products work well across different languages, across different regions of the world, language translation, but quite a few other things that need to go into technology to make them work well across the board. Let's see if this works in advancing slides. It does. So I'm going to start with accessibility. 16% of the world's population has a disability, whether this is a disability related to vision, hearing, speech, movement or mobility, or even cognitive disabilities like dyslexia. And that's over 1.3 billion people in the world. It's enormous. And accessibility, of course, is about making software that meets the needs of people with disabilities. Oops. Accessibility is part of Google's mission. Our mission statement is that we organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. This has been Google's mission from the beginning, and it's part of our DNA, part of everything that we do as a company. Although 1.3 billion people, that's a lot. What we do in accessibility is really relevant to everybody. Of course, to people with disabilities themselves, whether they identify as having a disability, or many times people have a disability but don't identify as having a disability. It's relevant to people whose friends, whose family members have disabilities, to people who work in the workforce with people with disabilities, because we all share the same technology. And I would argue it's relevant to everybody because we all have disabilities at times. If you're out in the bright sunlight after a beautiful rain in Santiago and the sun is shining down brightly on your phone, you have a vision impairment when you're looking at your phone. It is very hard to see things if there's not good contrast, if there's not good font sizes. And so building products that are accessible for people with disabilities makes them work better for everybody. So it's in every company's interest, everyone who produces technology, whether it's a government organization or anybody else, it's in their interest to create accessible technology. One of the applications I want to tell you about is called Lookout. And I'm going to go through a few different applications that my team built and that other teams at Google built, and they are all applications that use AI. Lookout is an application that uses computer vision, which is a branch of AI, to understand the world around a person. So this is an app designed for people who are blind or who have low vision, and it can identify objects and text, currencies, products in a person's environment. And over the years, we launched it a few years ago in 2019, but over the years, we've been adding more and more features to it and releasing it in more countries, including in Chile, which I mentioned earlier, internationalization isn't just about translation. So in the case of Lookout, it was about translation and about importing a database of products into the AI training data to make sure that we can recognize Chilean products with the camera. We also introduced recently a new images mode so that if you're a blind user and your friend sends an image to the group chat and they didn't mark it up, they didn't label it with what it is, it can also use computer vision to understand what's in the image and present that to the user. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you a little video. I made it in my hotel room yesterday, but I wanted it to be Chilean, so I couldn't make it in advance. And I'm going to show 3 modes of what Lookout can do. So the first is just the general explorer mode, where it just tells you things in your environment. The second is the food labels mode, which, well, maybe the name is self-explanatory, but what's interesting is it's not looking at barcodes on food. It's actually looking at a jar or a can and telling you what's in it. And if you're blind, it's really hard to tell the difference between Coke and Sprite. And then the third mode is document reading mode. So let's go and play that video, please.
Explorar. Puerta. Botella. Tetera. Jarra eléctrica. Taza para café. Etiquetas alimentarias. Papas fritas Crispo sabor queso envase de. Cóctel frutos secos alisol lata ne. Documentos. Mueve el dispositivo hacia la izquierda. Acerca el dispositivo. No te muevas. Bienvenido. Estamos felices de que esté aquí y haremos todo lo posible para que usted también se sienta así.
Okay. Ahora saben en qué hotel.
Explorar.
One thing I wanted to point out is that, so I showed some kind of silly things in that video, but this is actually really life-changing for people. And one of my favorite quotes is from a user, a blind user who was using this in a hardware store. And he told us, he gave us the feedback that he felt like he could see again as he was walking through the hardware store. Another very similar thing I wanted to point out is something called Get Image Descriptions on Chrome. And this, a lot of people use the Chrome browser. It's now the most popular browser in the world. And a good website, a developer will actually add tags on the images so that a blind person using a technology like a screen reader will know what the images are. However, not all programmers are that conscientious. And so what we've done is added in the ability right in the Chrome browser to understand what's in the image so that a user using a screen reader can get an automatic image description if the developer didn't do that. Moving to the area of motor disability. So by that, I mean, it can be a disability related to mobility, or in the case for this product, it's about having trouble using your hands. We have a product called Voice Access. I actually use it sometimes because I have problems from too many years of writing computer code. It wore out my arms a little bit. And so being able to use an app to do things on my phone using just my voice is really, really useful. And so voice access is something that it's, in some ways, it's more advanced than an assistant that you might be used to, like Google Assistant, that can do certain things on your behalf. Voice access actually lets you have complete control of your device, and it's using AI in a couple of ways. One is speech recognition, and we're so accustomed to speech recognition that we don't even think of it as AI anymore, but it is. And the reason it's gotten so much better over the last few years is because of AI and advances in the models and advances in how much training data we've been able to use to further develop the models. The other part of AI that voice access uses is screen understanding. So understanding the elements that are on the screen so that it can be used more efficiently. One example of screen understanding is icon detection. As I mentioned, not all programmers are conscientious. They don't always label their icons. And so if I am a user of voice access and I want to say, click the recycle icon, well, if a developer hasn't labeled it, how is voice access going to know what to click? It won't. And so we have a machine learning model, an AI model in there called IconNet that recognizes these icons and then is able to automatically do what the user has asked it to do. On the subject of speech recognition more generally, as I mentioned, speech recognition is an example of AI. In fact, it's very, very similar behind the scenes to how image understanding is done. The speech is transformed into signals. Those signals go through these neural networks that are called convolutional neural networks, which are the same as used in image processing. And then that is translated into speech in real time. And this machine learning approach to speech recognition enables us to do things we could never do before. One of the things we're working on right now, we have a partnership with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, as well as a few different companies and nonprofit organizations. We are developing speech recognition for people with disabilities whose speech is affected. So on your phone, speech recognition works really well if you don't have a speech disability. But if you have a speech disability, like a stutter, or if you have ALS, which affects your pronunciation, then it's hard for a standard speech recognition model to understand a person's speech. And so by using a machine learning approach, we can actually customize a speech recognition model to an individual and their own personal speech patterns, and then understand what they're saying and act on their behalf. This is an ongoing partnership with these organizations, and right now people are able to test it and to upload their own speech patterns in a privacy preserving way. For people who are deaf or hard of hearing, we have an application called Live Transcribe. Live Transcribe also uses speech recognition. It allows a person who is deaf to converse with a person who is hearing. It will transcribe what the speaker says onto the deaf user's phone. The deaf user can then type their response. One of the things that's really interesting that's built into this, that is pretty new, is sound understanding. So speech recognition and sound recognition are two different things, different models. Sound recognition can understand things like a knock on the door or the doorbell or your baby crying or your microwave beeping, and it can alert you to it. And if you have a smartwatch, it can actually alert your smartwatch too. Those were a few accessibility applications. I also want to touch on ML fairness, which goes directly back to what Mr. Sandker was talking about with his examples of how sometimes our technology reflects the biases and the history that exist in society. Google operates under a set of AI principles. These are principles that we abide by when we are creating new AI applications, which, to tell you the truth, is pretty much every single product at Google. has AI embedded in it nowadays. And so these principles really govern everything that we do. The first one of them is to be socially beneficial, and I gave you some examples of that. The second one is to avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. That's what we're going to go into a little bit. And then there are others about safety and privacy, and applications we will not pursue as a company. You can read about those. I don't want to get into all of these right now, but I do want to get into the avoid reinforcing unfair bias. If we as developers of applications are not careful, if we just without thinking take the training data generated by biased human beings and expose that to the world, we will come up with examples like these. However, we actually can use technology to overcome natural human biases. It can actually be a great leveler if we use it responsibly and carefully and design in ML fairness to what we do. Here are a couple examples of that. One is gender in Google Translate. Historically, not always true today in every country, fortunately, but historically there have been more male doctors than female doctors. And in translations from a non-gendered language like Turkish to a gendered language like English, we would find that the Turkish expression would typically translate to he is a doctor, not to she is a doctor. And so we redesigned Google Translate to, first of all, we had to build a new AI model to detect when gender bias can occur, and then refine existing translation AI models to be able to mitigate that and show multiple translations. And this is not a full solution because we recognize that there are not only two genders, we are only showing two genders, but we recognize that this could be expanded further and of course expanded further to other languages. Another example is in representativeness in data. When this is actually not a Google example, this is an open image classifier example, but when the algorithms were run on this data, they output the word wedding for the first three examples and not for the last example. But the last example is a perfectly valid instance of a wedding. And so this shows the importance of gathering a more diverse set of training data when developing these applications. And it's something that we've incorporated into what we do within Google so that we don't come up with 4 muscular male superheroes when somebody searches for that. So I want to also talk about the application of communication, specifically Google Translate. So Google Translate uses AI, and probably a number of you have used it. I use it regularly. One of the things you might not know, Google Translate launched in 2006. It wasn't using very advanced models. In 2016, we updated it to use, okay, I'm about to use some nerd words for any AI researchers in here, but what I'm going to say is so cool, it's worth it. So we updated Google Translate to use an attention system using transformers. That's the T in ChatGPT. Google invented that. We launched Google Translate with that in 2016. It allowed translations to be many, many times more accurate than they were before. It also allowed translations to be done between pairs of languages that didn't have training data, matching up those two languages. It can now go, if you have training data in other languages, that can use that information to better do translations between those two languages. just, I believe it was last year, I'm happy to say that we launched Google Translate in both Quechua and Aymara. And we're able to do so with less training data specifically because of these advances in AI. We're also doing an experiment. The Google Arts and Culture Division is doing work to preserve languages in the world. And we're doing this with 17 languages, including Rapa Nui, so that languages are not lost. Now, this presentation is about inclusion, but I decided to include this part about disaster preparedness and recovery because I do believe that this levels the playing field across the world. A lot of times the sensors, the detection systems are not as prevalent in areas of the world that have a lot of these natural disasters. And so by using AI and satellite imagery, we're able to bring this to more people and to save lives and help people. A few of these areas include flood detection, and we launched Flood Hub just earlier this year. We launched it a couple of years ago, and over time we've been bringing it to more and more countries and regions around the world. Just in June of this year, we launched it in Chile, and apparently on June 24th, there was huge flooding. And from what I've heard, people were able to use Flood Hub to get real-time information. It's not just reporting on flooding, it's flood prediction. We worked with scientists to be able to predict changes in water levels. And so we were able to give advanced warning to citizens in these regions that floods were going to occur. Similarly, we're able to use satellite imagery to be able to understand where wildfires are happening, but also we use AI to be able to predict where they are likely to go so that, again, people can have advanced warning. Earthquake alert, similarly, I know that's a big deal here. It didn't really help me with a huge earthquake in California. It wasn't that big, but at least it made me not nervous. I was like, okay, I know how big it's gonna be. I'll chill out, go back to bed. And it's not just for warning of disasters, it also helps with relief after disaster has occurred. Because again, using satellite imagery and then AI to understand what's in the images. Are these buildings that have been damaged by the disaster? We're able to point aid organizations in real time to some of the places that need the most help. For me, excuse me, working on accessibility for the last 10 years, working in these other areas I mentioned for the last several years, I've seen that AI has made a huge difference for us in our ability to be creative, in our ability to be efficient. Accessibility testing, we still have as many people doing accessibility testing, but now they don't have to do the boring stuff over and over again because they have technology that can help them do that. And then they can do the things that require their brains. And it's allowed us to develop applications like some of the ones that I talked about that we couldn't have even dreamt of before we had AI, that are really making a big difference in people's lives. Also in the workforce, I've found that having these things that we develop, working on things related to inclusion, related to accessibility, this causes people from underrepresented backgrounds in technology to want to work in technology. My accessibility team is half women. That's not necessarily the case for all of the engineering teams at Google, unfortunately. But working on these things leads to a more diverse workforce. Similarly, a more diverse workforce leads to products that work better for more people, that are more inclusive for more people. And so it's a virtuous cycle. And so although my focus is on products, I care very much about the people aspect of things and inclusive hiring and inclusive workplaces so that we can all do better things together. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. El Centro Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial de Chile, CENIA.
The CENIA, with the support of the IDB, CAF, OAS, and technical assistance of UNESCO and of Stanford, have elaborated the first Latin American Index for Artificial Intelligence. Publication collects information from the current situation in 3 key factors: enabling factors, research, and development, as well as governance. It also offers us a regional perspective of the current situation in issues related to ecosystem development and AI development, the relations between countries and best practices adopted by the different states and organizations. Following, I'd like to leave with you the director of CENIA, Alvaro Soto, who will offer us a few remarks.
Ahí sí. Así. Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Good morning. Thank you to all the authorities that have joined us here today, to all those attending via streaming. Thank you for joining us for the launch of the Latin American Index for Artificial Intelligence. Work on this began over a year ago, and we are very proud to present the results to you today. We hope it will be a positive contribution to the development of artificial intelligence in the region. We're very pleased with the results and with the process. I wanted to share with you today a couple of reflections on this, on the creation process and the current state of the index. First, and why it came about. The CENIA promotes supporting the development of AI in Chile and in Latin America. And when you want to develop something, it's very important to know where you're standing, what things we're doing right, what things we're not doing as well. And this is the origin of the index. And this is the picture of what has been done. And we want to do this yearly so that it becomes a video. What things we are moving ahead with, where we're becoming stagnated. And that is our motivation for this index. In terms of the creation process of the index, in the beginning, we were a little nervous. We had an ambitious goal, and we wanted to collect information for all of Latin America. How were we going to collect information for all these countries, valuable information? And perhaps, what if the information is not as useful or not believable? How do we formalize this in all of Latin America? Why not just Chile? We're closer. It's easier. We have contacts. So we are very pleased that we made the decision to do it for all of Latin America. The first thing we did is we started knocking on doors, and it was very interesting to see how well we were received. We had a lot of support, spectacular support. Every door we knocked on, the people said, okay, great, we like it. How do we support the effort? And not just that, we also knocked on doors in Latin America, and many colleagues, men and women, also offered support and started working on these data. And that the different groups started meeting weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, collecting information, following up, and we began collecting the information. So think about the groups, the different meetings that have taken place, the people working on this project worked as volunteers. And this is beauty. Sometimes we have very bad news of what happens in Latin America, but these were groups that were moved by contributing to the development of AI in Latin America. That is what moved them. They contributed their work to develop this index. It feeds the soul. The third reflection has to do with this, with the index. It is sometimes not very perceptible, but basically the CENIA was created with its own logo. It has its own website. And why didn't CENIA become the author of it on its own? No, because it is a collective effort. It is a contribution for artificial intelligence in Latin America. Artificial intelligence nowadays offers huge opportunities. It is a technological revolution, and taking advantage of this is an opportunity for the region. And the idea is to obtain three objectives. One, to have a more prosperous Latin America. But this prosperity, if it reaches us all, I think will not be enough. It needs to be a joyful prosperity. We need a happier Latin America. And this joy is also left behind if it doesn't reach everyone. So it needs to be a more inclusive Latin America as well, prosperous, joyful, and inclusive. And we truly hope that this Latin American index on artificial intelligence will contribute to this. But indexes are numbers. What truly matters is, and that will contribute to making it so, is that we're writing the history of Latin America. We're writing the story of how artificial intelligence will affect our lives. Artificial intelligence, this technological opportunity, needs to affect us in a way that we have a more prosperous, joyful, and inclusive Latin America, and it will depend on the contribution and effort of each and one of us. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will now present the findings of the Artificial Intelligence Index for Latin America. And this will be presented by Rodrigo Duran. This index, as I said, has no flags. And if we were to give it a name, it should be Latin American Index on Artificial Intelligence, Rodrigo Duran. Because Rodrigo has taken the lead and he has driven the whole process. Without him, it wouldn't be possible. Let's give him a round of applause. So, Rodrigo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alberto. The results are on the website. I'm sure none of you have seen them, though, thus far.
Ahí está. Bueno, Álvaro ya dijo gran
Alberto already mentioned the inspiration behind this, so I'm going to refer to something very concrete. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to everyone who took part in this. Here we have individuals from all of the Americas, some from California, some who were volunteers, some who incorporated this into their employment activities. And essentially, these are the authors of this project. We have Felipe, Andres, Claudia, Paula, many of them are present here today. And thank you to all of you, because this never would have been possible without your support and collaboration. So the applause that we just heard is for you. Now, having said that, I would also like to thank the institutions that really trusted the National AI Center. We have members of the steering committee as well who are present here today, but these institutions really believed in us, in an institution, in a center that was only barely a year old when we started knocking on their doors. So the CAP, the IDB, the UNESCO, LinkedIn, the Google, HAI, AWS, GitHub, etc. Thank you so much for the data, for the resources, for the opportunity. So what did we do? Well, Alberto already provided you with a sneak peek. We developed this indicator, an index that took into consideration the social, cultural, and other types of material in Latin America. There are several of these already in place, but this is for South America, Latin America. The other ones are mostly for North America. Now, I just wanted to provide you with an idea. 2.67% of the 22 publications come from Latin America. We're not relevant. So we really don't have a pulse on what's going on here. And so what were our goals? First, we wanted to measure and compare the relative performance by country in order to come up with better practices, to figure out what one country is doing well and replicate this elsewhere. Second, to make the state of art and the practice visible. Third, to facilitate indicator monitoring and following up on these indicators. These indicators that we're actually measuring consist of a proposal, a draft group set of indicators that could be improved. We also wanted to better understand the perception out there with regard to AI, and we wanted to identify future trends, that in Latin America are appearing slowly but surely with regard to AI. Now, before referring to the detailed information, I just wanted to mention how best you should be reading the ILIA document. I just mentioned this is on the website. The document has 5 different analytical areas. One, we refer to the enabling factors, the enablers, what you need to have in order for an AI system, a robust AI system to be developed in a country. Then we have information on R&D and adoption. Then we have governance. This measures the institutional arrangements relative to regulations, international insertion, etc. And then perception and future. These are more, the perception is more general. It refers to how society perceives AI. We had one sample, which is close to 3 million inputs on social media and then digital media. We wanted to understand what society thinks about AI. And then the future, that's the final chapter. This involves the opinion of more than 500 experts referring to the most relevant social impacts of AI, as well as the academic trends that we really need to be paying attention to, and the challenges, of course. So now, before referring to the findings, let me tell you how this can be read. These are the data we captured. You have one dimension, enabling factors, for example, infrastructure, talent development, and within each subdimension, you have one or several indicators, for example, connectivity, advanced human capital, digital literacy, and this is the level of data captured. You can see the progress with regard to 5G network and other aspects, what public programs exist, for example, and these are the data captured for each of the countries. That is what we are assessing. 4 methodological considerations worth mentioning with regard to this document. You need to hear this before we look at the findings. First of all, we prioritize sources that were comparable. For example, some countries are more advanced or had more higher level of capillarity with regard to the data, but these data were not necessarily comparable across the countries. So then we use secondary sources. We wanted to make sure that the data were comparable from one country to the next in order to ensure that the indicator was comparable and legitimate. These calculations go from 0 to 100. They're normalized, standardized from 0 to 100. You cannot extrapolate the results of the scores, but of the indicators you can. But this is not something you can extrapolate outside of Latin America, for example.
Y lo último,
And then finally, these are 3 challenges. The challenge is how can we have better data to better report locally and regionally. Again, we want these data to be comparable and more detailed. Findings. The first finding is that Latin America is very diverse. We have countries that are very well developed in terms of AI, relatively speaking, and some other countries where the development is minimal. And not a single country actually has everything that is essential to have a good AI development setting. Now, that's very important. Chile, for example, has good performance with regard to research, but Chile has poor performance with regard to patenting. In fact, Mexico and Brazil actually have more than 95% of the AI patents. The remaining 5% are distributed throughout the other countries. Now, likewise, with regard to Peru, there's interesting international insertion, Uruguay, Costa Rica, and many of these aspects are related to the technology transfer ecosystem. So there's not a single country that is doing this 100% well, like some of the Northern Hemisphere countries. Some of them do it 100% well. But of course, every country can make a contribution to the other country. There's lessons learned. And then as far as talent drain is concerned, we determined that this was on average 7% over the last 30 years. That means from 1990 to 2022, all of the researchers publishing with regard to AI, 7% of these have decided to publish outside of the region. And that figure has remained steady over time. Now, when you compare this to those who study abroad and come back to the region, this graph shows the proportion of authors that had published outside of Latin America and that are now publishing within Latin America. You can see that there's a downward trend. In other words, local systems are maturing. They no longer depend so much on those from abroad. We are creating our own wealth and group of national and regional authors. When compared to 30 years ago, they were all from abroad. This shows the behavior of the talent drain concept. It's important to address how the first 5 countries remain constant: US, Spain, Portugal, UK has dropped its representation similar to the US, and China has emerged with a great deal of impetus. And we can see that this pattern repeats. So a lot of the people who leave eventually come back. 4 years later, maybe one could say on average, and the global trends are relatively the same. Now, this has shown that a lot of those leave to become trained, and then they come back. We have also observed that there are significant data available in the region. This comes from the data barometer, different index. If you look in blue, the blue bar refers to the available the average data availability and governance. Red refers to the impact and use of data. We can see a gap here. We have capacity, we have governance, we have data availability, but this does not necessarily translate into concrete impacts. Now let's take a stab at why this might be happening. Well, because of this, the Latin American countries, relatively speaking, have limited computing capacity, specifically cognitive AI computing capacity. Brazil is doing well, but the rest of the countries do not have the local infrastructure for this type of capacity, despite the fact that there are data centers, but the data centers in existence are more traditional. They're not so much related to AI, and AI calls for a more specialized central computing capacity. And today they're primarily based on cloud services, but those can be quite prohibitive for the academic sector and for states. So there's a significant gap here with regard to how the data of an ecosystem can be better used for a relevant social impact and use. We think this is one of the aspects that really can make a difference if addressed. Fourth, these are data we obtained through LinkedIn. We have seen that the Latin American employment force is falling behind in terms of the times with regard to AI. This graph shows the relative penetration in the industries on the left versus, or the relative penetration of traditional and disruptive technical capacities by industry. This line at 1 refers to the average global penetration. So if a country is below this line, it means that they're doing worse than the average global penetration of technical capacity and disruptive capacity in this type of industry. I showed Chile and Brazil because those are the countries with the best performance with regard to the index overall, but you can see that Brazil has a higher productivity, more sophisticated than Brazil. Brazil is more sophisticated than Chile. Chile shows a significant setback with regard to Brazil. So we are doing worse off in terms of the capacity, technical and disruptive capacity required for AI when compared to the rest of the globe. The fifth finding is that we have seen interesting scientific collaborative opportunities available. And this shows the percentage of scientific collaborations in the different areas that we have identified, geographic areas. Here we studied 500,000 scientific collaborations roughly. We can see that in 2008, 2011, from 2008 to 2011, EU collaborations were roughly 70%. That significantly dropped in 2018 to 2022. But look at here, Latin America is only 7.53% of the collaborations for 2018 to 2022, compared to Europe, which continues to hold steady at 50% practically. Now, it's not bad that we're collaborating with Europe. This is probably related to the computing capacity and the resource availability, but we here in the region have common challenges, common interests, common language, and we're collaborating less than we really should be, or that we could be within the region. There are also investment opportunities here. Here you can see the total 2022 AI private investment figures. According to the IoT source, the source is not listed. I apologize for that. Emerging Technology Observatory. They said it was $190 billion, roughly 181.8% for the rest of the world, and 8.2 were 181.8 billion were for the rest of the world, and 8.2 for Latin America. And that is less than 6% of the GDP from 2020. Now we could say, okay, what if we really want to take advantage of AI? We would have to have more an investment here with regard to the GDP percentage. So point is, there's an opportunity for private sector here to invest in Latin America. Seventh finding, very interesting for us, and we were referring to that earlier. This is related to the disciplinary nature of AI. You can see the different types of authors and their original disciplines. Blue refers to authors who published in 2021, but who didn't publish again in 2022. It's not that they have died or left the discipline. They're just authors who said, okay, I have a AI tool and a concept, and I'm publishing on this in a discipline that's not computer science or a specific computer science related discipline. Then we have the next line that refers to the new authors emerging. That's less than the total number of authors and more than the quote unquote cross-disciplinary authors. Anyhow, this is a trend that is across the board in all the countries. And this shows that the main source of scientific academic publications is more cross-disciplinary than from AI specific discipline. In other words, AI is a very versatile concept with regard to publications. Now, the eighth finding is with regard to institutional arrangements and the vision as a starting point. Institutional arrangements are the starting point for having more sophisticated systems relative to regulations. In other words, a country's capacity to have a common perspective, a common vision involving different players with regard to what they would like to secure in terms of AI can be useful, can be correlated with when the actual agreement is reached, they can actually make progress with regard to regulations, international connections, etc.
This also calls our attention to what we see on the right, which is the feelings between social media on the right-hand side and the feeling of digital media. And they're much more positive on digital media than social media. And the same thing happens inversely with positive sentiments. Although the social media have a more favorable perspective of digital media, it doesn't necessarily translate to digital conversation. That may have to do with the legitimacy of the discipline that we're working on today. Therefore, for us, it is a matter of concern, and we need to show people that AI is positive. And then there's this dichotomy that we've talked about with the experts in the region between the fears and hopes of AI. It is a wonderful tool for professors, but it can also destroy. And it is a wonderful tool to find medication solutions, but it can increase inequality in health. It can help us with climate change, or it can generate so many emissions that it'll increase the problems we see in the environment. So what really caught our attention and has to do with what Alvaro said is that all of the groups of experts said that any decisions that we make today will define the path that we would follow in the future. In conclusion, and we didn't set this as a finding, we didn't put it in this document as a finding, is that the limiting factors are somehow enabling factors. There is a very close correlation between companies that are able to generate these enabling factors and turn it into something generative. And cooperation agencies should be more focused on this, and that would be much better for the artificial intelligence systems development. And on the other hand, it could develop faster or favor a more faster development and more sustainable AI. Thank you all very much, and we'll continue with the panel. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you for the presentation and for leading the production of the index. We now have a panel on perspectives on artificial intelligence for Latin America, and we will have Maurice Robert, Director of the OAS's Economic Development Department, Pablo Zamora from Hub APTA, also Pablo Angelelli, Head of Operations at the IDB, and Maria Isabel Mejias, Senior Executive for CAF, and Natalia Iregui. Thank you very much for the presentation. Welcome to the panel. We will have around 1 hour of discussion, and the idea is to ask each of you a question, and then we'll come back to a second round of questions. Maurice, from the perspective of the OAS, how has this option of AI technology evolved in Latin America and the Caribbean, and what are the success cases? Macarena, thank you. Thank you to all the authorities and special guests that are with us here today. I'd like to congratulate Senia for the initiative and for bringing all the partners together to elaborate the first Latin American index on artificial intelligence. And that's the first thing. Before answering your question, I believe that the index shows the importance of generating spaces for collaboration at a public, private, academic level, as well as strategic partnerships to address these challenges, joint challenges, and to find best practices, and of course, to provide local evidence to assess the challenges and opportunities of AI in Latin America. So from the OAS, we believe we must address this from a regional perspective with the promotion and regulation. So the OAS has 11 ministerial processes. One of them is science and technology. And as of 2017, the ministers of science and technology in Medellin began a conversation on artificial intelligence. For what? Well, to document best practices, to exchange cases, and analyze the recent advances, and to look at the future transformative technologies and to analyze them with a view to building consensus and public policy recommendations. Now, 2017, 2021, December 2021, the ministers made the decision, two important decisions. One was to train youth in terms of transformative technologies. They launched what is called the Academy for Youth and Transformative Technology. The goal has been set by the ministers, and it is to train, certify 10,000 people, because the word youth is quite broad. 10,000 people in the Americas with the skills, credentials to participate in innovation. To date, we have 31,000 people in this academy. We launched the first course on artificial intelligence in Spain in June. We have some other courses for transformative technology. And another decision of these ministers in 2021 was to launch the initiative of the Center for Excellence of the OAS in Transformative Technologies. To do what? To lead research studies, prospective studies at a regional level. And one of these transformative technologies is to support in the training and collaboration, regional collaboration, with a view to identify and map future trends on the AI topic and to provide input for public policy development. CENIA in February this year requested its designation as Excellence Center of the OAS on AI. So CENIA will lead this effort. We are very pleased with this because here we talk about Latin America within the OAS and the ECLAC context. It's Latin America and the Caribbean. We need to make sure that everyone's voice is on the table. And there's other cases, other initiatives of the OAS that, and I'll mention one, after the launch of ChatGPT in November last year. Now, what we're looking at is not only science and technology. This is a cross-cutting topic, and ministers of development, of sustainable development, of tourism, of culture. So this conversation is a global conversation. This is new, and there are fora on artificial intelligence, specifically the imperatives of artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence for public policies. In May, there was a meeting in Washington at the OAS that included representatives of governments, Latin America, Caribbean, the private sector, academia, to discuss how to exchange ideas and build consensus. And the next topic that we're going to touch on in the roundtable in November this year will be on the future of work. So these are topics that have to do with progress, and collaboration is key. No one can move forward, no country can move forward, no region can move forward on its own. That is why we are here today at ECLAC, together with CENIA here in Chile. Thank you. True, that's why the index is so important as well. It's a roadmap. Marisabel. Well, it's part of the CAF. You've been working together with UNESCO throughout the region. How do you see governance in Latin America and the Caribbean regarding artificial intelligence? Thank you, Macarena, for your question. I would like to begin by thanking Rodrigo for inviting CAF to be part of the construction of this index. And to speak of governance, which is one of the chapters taken into account to build this index, I'd like to mention 4 different topics. First, who is leading this effort on artificial intelligence in our countries? And what we're going to see is that it's not the same in every region. There are some countries where artificial intelligence leadership is carried out by the ministries of science, technology, and innovation, which is the case here, the case in Brazil, and some lead from offices that work with the presidency of the republic, with the executive. There's also one in Uruguay called OCTIC, and it's managed by the SIC, which has led the digital government policy in Peru, the Ministry of Council of Ministers, and in other countries, it is also led by the ministries of communications or information technologies, which is the case of Colombia or Ecuador. And there's other countries where we don't know. I'm serious. There's countries where you simply don't know, where it is not being taken into account and there's no artificial intelligence policy. And here I go on to governance, which is about the existence of national policies or national artificial intelligence policies. 7 countries in the region have such policy. For example, Mexico was the first to issue an artificial intelligence policy in 2018, and it's something that happens in the region, that sometimes one government issues it and then another government comes along and just copies it and puts it in a drawer. This happened in Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, and I think that it is very interesting to look at the case of Chile, because a national artificial intelligence policy created with a high participation of all, and even within in the midst of the pandemic, still continues. It is reviewed. It is ongoing.
So there are some countries, 7 countries. I can tell you what they are, I have them written down. Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, the second that issued the policy in 2019, Brazil, Peru, which does not, has not fully adopted it, but published it for consultation, Colombia and Mexico, and that's it. So there are countries such as Uruguay that expedited its policy in 2019 and is coming up with the second version of this policy, but there are other countries that do not have anything, and they have no intention of developing a policy. And there are others that are actually developing one, such as Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. And actually, we within the CAF and with support from UNESCO are helping them draft their national AI policy. The third issue I would like to refer to is leadership, public policy. Well, I already talked about leadership, public policy. Now let me refer to ethics. Now, there are international organization recommendations and guidelines with regard to ethics. For example, the principles, the OECD AI principles, or UNESCO also adopted some recommendations back in December 21. These were adopted by more than 190 countries. Or other codes of ethics out there. For example, one for Google. All the big techs have their ethics policies as well. And in Latin America, for example, Colombia decided to have to build an ethics framework for AI for its country. And this national AI ethics framework has its own unique attributes. For example, aspects related to adopting AI. Children and teen adoption of AI is very specific to the Colombian context, for example. So these ethics frameworks are adopted internationally or nationally thus far. And the CAF is also working with subnational or local governments as well. For example, Vicente Lopez, which is a municipality in Argentina, that began developing AI solutions. And they said, we need some help. We need an ethics framework. Please help us. Because this is a significant challenge and responsibility. And when we receive requests for support, we help out. We're also working on an AI ethics laboratory. And when we conduct ethics impact of draft projects within the laboratory in order to make sure everything is working and head in the right direction. We're also working with the state of Jalisco and Mexico. They have also developed AI solutions. In fact, they have an incredible one that's won awards. It's AI for detecting diabetic renal disease, and they are making great strides with regard to this and have requested support for the ethics component as well. Now, in order for the LAC region to actually have an opportunity for discussion and to have a dialogue with regard to governance and ethics concerns, UNESCO and CAF joined efforts to adopt the Regional AI Ethics Council. This council will be launched on the 23rd and 24th of October in Chile. Two key objectives. One is to provide an opportunity for dialogue for the regional partners. For example, the EU does this, it works as a region, and the idea is for LAC to have its own discussion and have a voice with regard to these, participate in the global discussion. The idea is for this to be a knowledge hub as well. We know that there's a great deal of imbalance in terms of AI development. We've seen that in these presentations. So it's very important for us to have our own knowledge transfer opportunity. So that's part of the contribution of this regional council. Now let me refer to regulations. Regulations that go beyond ethics frameworks. I'm referring to legislation. Brazil is worth citing. The Chamber of Deputies is addressing a bill, and then the Senate as well. They have a committee addressing these aspects. Both chambers of the legislative body are working on this in order to have an AI law, which is inspired by the EU law. And there is a focus on risk mitigation. And then we have Peru, the only country within LAC that has adopted an AI law. Now they're working on the body of regulations. Also, we from within CAF are encouraging the countries to experiment with regard to regulations applicable to AI. For example, we are proposing that before adopting AI-related laws, that they build their wealth of evidence and their body of evidence. For example, in Chile, with the Ministry of the Economy, we designed an AI regulatory sandbox, toolbox. We've had working groups to address this, and we're making progress. We're also providing support to the National Data Protection Authority in Brazil that aims to have an AI sandbox as well, but generative AI. So we are providing support to this body in Brazil as well with regard to designing and implementing this sandbox. In short, as far as governance and regulatory aspects are concerned, there's a wide variety in Latin America. There's an imbalance. We have some that have policies, some that are playing a leadership role, some are working on ethics and regulations and legislation, and some are very far behind, though. As a result, I think we need to make an effort to, as we say, level the playing field in this regard in Latin America. And that, well, governance is key because this is one of the enablers for AI. And you need to create the enabling context, regulatory ethics, policy, leadership enabling context in order for AI to be fully leveraged and to take best advantage of all of its potential in our countries. Thank you, Maria Isabel. Pablo, good morning. I would like to know what issues do you think the LAC countries face with regard to talent development? We saw that this was something that the index addressed, and how is the IDB dealing with this? Good morning, all of you. Thank you. I would just, again, like to echo words of my colleagues and thank you all for this invitation. And I would like to commend Alvaro and Rodrigo for this index. This index provides us with the evidence we need for better public policies. In fact, last night I was speaking with Alvaro and he was saying that AI is a train, right? A fast-paced train steaming ahead. And we all have to figure out how we can best take advantage of this. We view AI as an overall technology that can have an impact on many different sectors of our lives. And as the bank's work is concerned, and specifically in Chile, we have a two-pronged strategy. One is to advance toward the economy of the future, and two, social cohesion. Now, absolutely, without a doubt, AI can help us achieve both objectives, but it can also aid other cross-cutting requirements such as climate change. And then talent comes into play, specifically advanced talent, and I think the index also refers to this. Latin America faces a significant challenge with regard to the number of researchers, specifically when we compare the situation of LAC to the leading innovative countries. We see that in our region, there are fewer researchers than there are elsewhere. And when we double click on researchers working in AI, we can see that the differences are more prevalent. So the first challenge is to boost our own capacity. Now, when we refer to boosting our own research capacity, we need to add individuals to the ranks and we need to add infrastructure as well so that the researchers can do their work better. Now, let's refer to the labor markets and the future labor markets. First, we need to understand what's going on and then take action from the public policy realm. There are some publications that the bank has issued with regard to the jobs that are going to disappear. And when you look at the publications issued last year, you can see that we've already made significant changes since then, and the situation today is not the same as it was a year ago. So secondly, we need to better understand the changes occurring constantly within the labor market. Challenge number 3. The IT industry calls for certain things that we are unable to meet. Training at all levels is not keeping up. We do not have enough human capital. So we need to speed up human capital training and formation and education in order to really meet the demands of this growing industry. In short, we see that there are significant opportunities in terms of making progress towards the sustainability development goals throughout the region. As far as human capital is concerned, I mentioned 3 challenges that actually need to be addressed along with governance issues. You cannot address these in an isolated fashion. And they also need to be addressed with regard to infrastructure challenges. We need to have the necessary tools. I'm not going to bore you with what we're doing at the bank. We have several projects underway. For example, we can use AI, and we're actually doing this. We use AI to help individuals define labor conversion projections. And this project also supports census work. In other words, AI is helpful in allowing us to rethink how individuals will be trained. We need to, I guess, hack the education system. And how can we do that? Well, the bank has a wealth of experience in terms of boot camps. And there's another there's an interesting initiative called Digital Talent for Chile. This is underway, and this program allowed for training more than 500 individuals in these key skills that are required for meeting the industrial demands. And Digital Talent for Chile specifically focuses on public and private partnerships. We need to work with all the different partners, Fundación Chile, Corfo, Sensei, with all of the government and other types of partners working in training. And then the IDB is also working closely with the digital government initiative in Chile on the national data strategy. I was actually rereading that strategy this morning, and one of the paragraphs says, in the public sector, we have much more data than we are actually using to add value. So I think there's a significant opportunity there. And in the public sector, as far as the labor market is concerned, the competition between the public and private sector is affecting the capacity in the public sector and the capacity of the public sector to add value, because we see that often the private sector pays better than the public sector, and obviously that is an issue. So thank you. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you for sharing the challenges of public-private partnerships. Let's continue then with another question. What are the main challenges in trying to grow in the midst of this digitalization? First of all, I'd like to thank Rodrigo. The information he showed us is extremely interesting. As director of the hub, what I can say is that it takes the academia information to the market. We realized that it was very important to have this link to the industry, but it was very difficult. And we decided to opt for artificial intelligence. We joined forces with CENIA and other parties to see how we could move forward in this challenge. There's several challenges that are faced by the startups, and one of them is power and challenge at the same time. And there's so much information that we don't know when we're going to do this if we don't have the infrastructure. And it needs to be scalable. Data management, contract hiring, etc., is important to have actions to retain talents within the companies, the startups, and the university spin-offs as well. Researchers can freely share and participate in these technologies that arise, and also having proper financing, because the risk investors wish to invest in the technology, but there's uncertainty and fear. So we need to be attentive to this and to launch this ecosystem that, as Paulo mentioned, is growing, and there is still a lot of uncertainty. So we need more certainties. Another thing is regulation and ethics. There's been a lot of talk about that, and it's been very important in managing data with the startups. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that at the hub, we carried out a survey that has to do with the gaps and what was still needed. One of the things that we wish to build is, okay, so the technological transfer process has been ongoing for 15 years, and we're used to transferring patents, but this new system, AI, is completely new, and the model that arises is not through patents. Less than 1% is the patenting we have in Latin America. So we have been faced with new models, and the way we see it at the Hub is that universities need to be prepared to work with corporations, and they will see results that will not result in a patent and other business models that we still don't know. And what we do is we are collaborating, and we feel collaboration is key to win this race that we find ourselves in. And we see that there isn't a lot of experience in the world, but it's what we want to do on the side of universities to use and catalyze all the technology that we have until today. Kevin, good morning. You're architect, solutions architect for the government. You're coming from AWS. I just wanted to ask you, what are the emerging trends in the use of AI at a state level? Thank you, Macarena, for the space, and I'd like to thank you. As the panel mentioned, I'd like to thank Senia for the index. On my hand, I'm the solutions architect for AWS, Amazon, and we've seen it on the side of health. They use artificial intelligence to synthesize proteins, and this results in new medication and vaccines, and also using artificial intelligence and other models to make predictions on illnesses that are still unknown or rare. That reduces the search range for a possible solution for our patients. And on the other hand, we see a very strong trend in energy to optimize and forecast the power grids and systems to try to achieve greater efficiency in the network and provide more benefits to the users. As I mentioned in the panel, we also see a trend in Latin America of implementation of this technology in smart cities. For example, transportation, health, and energy in smart cities to identify the traffic of people during the day in order to identify where there's going to be bottlenecks. And artificial intelligence as a technology is spectacular, but we need to apply it to citizens. That is where we find the true motive. I'm an engineer by trade, and I am passionate about models and how they function, but the true value is in benefiting people. That is what drives us at AWS, at least in my area, trying to help national governments and provincial and regional governments so they can reduce the gap between technology and artificial intelligence and citizens. We saw this a lot in the beginning of 2020, amidst of COVID, and we had the possibility of deploying technological solutions in record time and making announcements to citizens with technology also in record time. This is why we have tried to offer our support in training people within government so that they can implement technology, and also in less time. Well, in regards to what Kevin mentioned, being at the service of people, what would be the economic and social benefits of implementing artificial intelligence in Latin America and the Caribbean, and how can these governments promote this sustainable development? Thank you. The Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Dr. Salazar, mentioned the issue of productivity. We know that artificial intelligence can help bridge economic gaps. But this means perhaps helping the region in becoming an economy based on raw material to an economy based on knowledge, improving salaries, having high quality employment, etc. This is interesting, but how do we achieve it? Many people today have addressed the topic of talent. In this context, I believe it is important to make the connection between government, industry. We need to perhaps rethink the educational model, not only in Latin America, but in the world, because speed, the changes in technology, transformative technology, specifically generative AI, force us to rethink everything. And in the communities, we need to find the solutions to add to the real problems of societies. If not, we're going to have issues at a social level. So we need to invest in an infrastructure, connectivity. Every year, it is mentioned every year. So we need to bear this in mind. That's why we have collaboration. And without creating bureaucratic structures, we need to make sure that there is a committee to exchange ideas, and create new solutions that will help not only one part of the population, but everyone. There's a possibility of bridging gaps, but we need to make sure that we have tools to develop or to make sure that we can manage artificial intelligence. Thank you. Maria Isabel, what strategies are you using to promote collaboration between the public and private sectors? Also, investment in infrastructure, digital infrastructure. Sure. Macarena, the infrastructure has been mentioned by everyone. It is a key enabler of artificial intelligence. And I can mention one initiative that we would like to support here at CAF for all Latin America and the Caribbean, which is the construction of centers, high performance computer centers. In Latin America, we don't have that infrastructure dedicated and specializing in what we need for artificial intelligence to run models that can help us solve issues faced by all our countries. Mobility, and to run these artificial intelligence solutions, we need these advanced computer centers, high performance computer centers. And we have two countries that have expressed interest in starting to think about how to build these centers. One is Chile. So from Senia and Corfo, they would like to and have the idea of building a high performance computer center, but also carbon neutral at the Lithium Valley. So that is the first initiative. And then we have another initiative with the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic also wants to build a high performance computer center. So we can help build those two high performance centers, but they need to provide services not only to the two countries, but to the entire region.
Obviously, we would need to build the connectivity structure, and CAF is there to support the region with this high-speed network to connect the centers so that they can serve all the countries, to spur more research and more use of AI to solve some of the concerns. So that's, in short, what our pipe dream. So with the North Hub, the South Hub, and the idea would be for the region to make progress with regard to talent, governance, and have good data structure and high performance, high speed computing capacity so that we can truly squeeze the best we can out of this technology. Right, we see that we need more than index. Now, Pablo, what strategies do you think are more effective to foster collaboration between governments, academia, companies with regard to promoting talent development? And talk about your perspective. Let me provide you with a personal story. 4 or 5 years ago, I visited Canada, a leading AI country, and I went to learn from their experience and then import those experiences back to the region. And on those missions, you speak to a wealth of different institutions. And my colleagues and I, at one point in time, were confused as to who the public parties were, who the private parties were, who civil society was. And we decided, that's perfect. The fact that we're not sure who's who means that you have a healthy ecosystem that's well connected, well interconnected, and where the boundaries between public, private, civil society are quite hard to define. That's positive. So that's when you think about Senia, the Senia Center, which is very closely tied with startups and government institutions, and that feeds these revolutionary governance projects. That's where we need to head. And the bank has always acted as a facilitator. We invite people over to dinner, one could say, and we let them all enjoy. And this is not something that will occur overnight. If you want to have these context of trust and collaboration and cooperation, you need to pave the way. And that's what we're doing from within the bank. I also wanted to talk about something else, ethics. Allow me to share with you an initiative, FERTLAC. That's a bank initiative involving the collaboration of the bank with other regional institutions and companies to learn by doing. FERLAC has a chapter in Chile called the Transparent, responsible, and ethics algorithms. This is a project with the Adolfo Ibáñez University, and they developed a variety of different pilot projects with public agencies, resulting in guidelines that were drafted so that when the state purchases algorithms, it needs to be careful enough to not fall prey to many of the pitfalls that we have already cited here today. I mentioned that there are several different ways to contribute to talent, and I think one of the key ones is learning by doing. I think that's a very useful path forward. And then the boot camps, already referred to these. Also, allow me to mention how Becas Chile, Chile Scholarships Program, is an example, a benchmark for the region. They have been slowly but surely developing talent and have positioned Chile as an AI leader in the AI leader period. And there's a similar program called Becal in Paraguay. This program sends Paraguayan students abroad and has resulted in significant capacity in this sector. And we did the same in Argentina with a program called Becar. And I think that so far, this program has trained more than half the data scientists working in Argentina. So when you think about those scholarship programs, you need to remember and recall that it's very important to send people abroad, but you need to make sure that they come back and have an enabling environment to work back in their home countries. So when you support someone to study abroad, well, that entails a significant investment. So you need to be in close contact with the public and private sector in order to figure out where these people will be employed when they come back. So we're working closely with the Ministry of Science and Technology to reinforce these initiatives. We are also facing that challenge at organizations. So Barinka, Pablo referred to ethics issues. What are the regulatory and ethics matters that startups need to take into consideration when developing AI-based solutions? Well, first of all, you need to understand that several studies were conducted to characterize overall entrepreneurial projects, and there are several gaps that were identified. One was the fact that there's not a lot of the startups don't work together all that well. So there are some Chilean success stories. We analyze non-national experiences as well, but they're so far removed from our national reality. And then as far as regulatory issues are concerned, technology in the health field is challenging. Why am I mentioning this? Well, because these are some of the topics that we are trying to solve. And while we're trying to solve these, we are working on other things, and we are delving into more complex layers. And we have many challenges. For example, data protection is a concern. In Chile, we do have an agency called Quality Data and Data Privacy Agency. This allows for you to obtain informed consent, and this adheres to international standards. Someone also mentioned bias, discrimination and bias. This is unresolved as we speak. We need to take this into consideration. And we also know that there is an event in October, Maria Isabel mentioned, an event relative to regulatory and ethics issues, and this is something that really needs to be addressed. We need to make sure that there's diversity, and then transparency in the system's decision-making. How are these decisions made, for example? I would have to say the most complicated challenge relative to startups is how, for example, you have many different startups in the health sector. Now, what happens if you have an erroneous diagnostic? Who's responsible? So the accountability system is key. Is it the developer? Is it the regulator? Is it the entrepreneur? Who? Who made the mistake? And that is something we need to figure out. Thank you for that. Kevin, looking towards the future, what are the short and midterm variables that you expect to see contributing to AI adoption in Latin America, and how is AWS involved? Well, as far as talent is concerned, generating and attracting talent, we do generate talent. We have AWS government and university related talent development programs. And secondly, I think Pablo mentioned the issue related to sustainability. We have a console, you know that, where you can see the impact on the environment, and you can reduce the cost of that impact on the ecosystem, for example. And then with regard to AWS or Amazon decisions, we have been investing in AI for more than 20 years, both AWS and Amazon. For example, when you go to the e-commerce website and you purchase something and then you have suggestions, related products or suggested products, obviously there's AI behind that. At the logistics centers as well, the robots transferring products from one spot to the next are working with route optimization technology, and automatic payment is carried out through computer vision. Now, Amazon identified some needs and developed the technology to meet those needs. And then this was provided to the rest of the world. And then ChatGPT, we work with generative AI as well. We partnered with emerging AI companies to do this, and we can easily come up with foundational models without actually understanding the math running behind the scenes. And we have IT experts, data scientists, and other individuals studying data can actually use the infrastructure, the AWS infrastructure, using Amazon created optimized microprocessors for their work. And this at a low cost for regular citizen users. Amazon develops the technology and provides technology. So we are out there to make this technology more accessible. Maybe I guess you could say 10 years ago, this was practically impossible. For example, Bedrock or SageMaker, these are machine learning related services. Today, a user can open his or her account and start working with these basic models. Now, let's refer to the state realm. Short and midterm, what we envision is, and I'm referring to my own personal experience as well, we envision contact centers when you have someone from society wishing to contact a public agency to raise a concern, to lodge a complaint. Maybe they want to talk with someone specifically. And today, this is all automated. You can call a phone line managed by AWS, and behind the scenes, we have natural language processing, and in real time, you can understand if the person has a neutral, positive, or negative experience. That's fabulous because that is non-structured data that in the end can categorize what's going on, can say this is going well, this is not so positive, etc. And today, this is what we're doing. This exists in public agencies today. That's incredible. Thank you so much for all of you, for taking part in this discussion.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you. This has been very interesting panel. I think that, Elisa, you have some things? Go ahead. I apologize. We would like to thank the panel members. You have a token present from Senya on your seats. In order to adjourn this event, I would like to first of all thank all of you for staying until the end. And in appreciation, we would like to invite you all to a cocktail reception in the foyer. Thank you very much.